Hello and welcome back to the Securing Industry podcast brought to you by Arcadian Technology. For today's episode, I am joined by Lukas Bosch. Welcome to the podcast, Lukas.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No problem. Great to have you with us. Lukas is the OT platform manager for Viega, who are an international manufacturer headquartered in Germany. I actually know Lukas quite well. I actually recruited him for Viega. They're actually a customer of mine. And Lukas previously used to work in the world of consulting for Thales within OT security, supporting different customers on OT security programs, and he now does this internally for Viega. And we're going to talk about a subject which is quite close to Lukas's heart today, which is why OT security programs fail. And we're going to talk about this in general and how this can be an impact for different customers across different industries from what he's seen through his experiences. So we're going to dig into that in some good detail today, talk about general challenges, and hopefully there'll be some good learnings for the listeners and some really good insights that Lukas can bring to this. So let's get stuck into that in a second, Lukas. But I just wanted to ask how you actually got into the world of OT security, Lukas. This is something I ask kind of all of my guests. So maybe if you could just bring us up to speed on that, please.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question because OT security is a fairly new field, for a still new field. I mean, there are people in this area for 15 years or what, but most of us are in there for 5 years or something like that. So I started studying electrical engineering. I did something completely else after that. Did a lot of technical documentation for Thales actually for a few years, and then I started to look around to do something new. And we had a cybersecurity program started, or a consulting program started in Germany from Thales, and I started there. And the first few months, actually, I was learning classical IT security, pen testing, whatnot. And after a few months, our colleagues came to us and said, we need someone who does OT security. And since I have a background in electrical engineering, I started digging into that, and I stayed there because honestly, for me, and it might upset some IT guys out there, but for me, I think the OT security world is much more interesting than the IT security world, because you have much more individual solutions that you need to come up with, because the standard solutions that you have in IT, like put this client on, put this agent on, and whatever, they don't really work in the OT world. So it's much more interesting, apart from actually going into a shop floor and see how products are made, what you don't see necessarily when you're in IT. So yeah, that's
Okay.
how I got in the area of OT security.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so sort of a bit of a classical route, sort of transition from IT security into OT. Now, mate, yeah, I see that a lot, to be honest. Okay, so let's get into our key subject, sort of why OT security programs fail, and we'll obviously, pick this apart a little bit. So maybe kick us off with your overview of that, Lukas, and then we'll sort of dig into it in more detail. So how would you summarize why OT security programs fail?
So there are a lot of reasons why, obviously, why OT security programs can fail. There are some technical reasons that companies and people are not up to the task on a technical level, having difficulties with the specialities of OT security on a technical aspect. But where I want to focus on, because I think it's one of the main reasons, and the reasons that actually influence all other aspects of this are the organizational topics. So what I want to talk about is mainly the point with management buy-in, and also a little bit about the difference between what companies starting with OT security programs or starting to ramp up their OT security programs actually need usually, and what the industry is offering them and talking about, and this kind of stuff. Because I think there's a little bit of difference between those two things. Yeah. So those are a few points. As I said, as always, there are a lot of things that could go wrong, but I think those are the main topics we need to talk about, because, yeah, that's something. There is some discussion about that, but I mostly see technical discussions, and I think this is at most secondary. This discussion. At first, we need to talk about some organizational topics and some cultural topics actually within companies.
Okay. So why do you think the more kind of high level management relevant discussions are, from your perspective, I guess in terms of your experience and what you've seen, more important to set a program up for success rather than the sort of technical hardware focused approaches? Why do you think they're more important, basically?
Yeah. I'm not that experienced in other projects, but I think it's the same for every project. If you start a project, you need some higher management attention on it to keep it running and to keep it on track. I think in OT security this is even more the case, because you need to get so many people into that, and you need someone who actually is responsible for it, and there are standards defining it, saying the product owner, the product or asset owner is responsible for this and that and that, and you need this person to actually take this responsibility and take it seriously, and usually the asset owner is some guy in the middle or higher management, some segment leader or head of production or something, head of plants, and you need the guys above them to steer them a little bit. So you need a higher management buy-in. Yeah, especially for the topics of responsibility to organize and steer all the different departments involved in this, because you always need some guy from IT, you always need some guy from maintenance or the OT department, who usually don't really know about the IT part, and this part is getting bigger, but the IT guys don't know about the OT part, and this part is very important. Because we will talk about this in a bit, but you have some big differences between OT security and IT security, how it's done and how it's perceived, and what methods you have to reach your goal. And then the main topic I always see when we talk about starting and ramping up an OT security program within a company, you need to define what your goal is, and that's something you cannot ask an engineer what your security goal is for this or that machine or system. I always have this when I was with customers as a consultant, I was always asked this question: what keeps you up at night? What is your biggest fear? What is the worst thing that could happen? Not necessarily on an OT security or network event, but in general, what is the worst thing that could happen? And if you ask that to a maintenance guy or an IT guy, every system is on the same level, because their job is to keep every system running. But if you ask someone in a higher level and a higher management, they usually know a little bit more about, okay, if that machine falls down and doesn't work anymore, we have a big problem, because, I don't know, maybe it's a melting oven or something, and you have big environmental issues, or I once talked about with a colleague about some big cranes on an harbor. Sorry, if that falls over, you have bigger problems than if some ship is not going off or whatever.
Mm,
So they usually know their so it's classical risk management, isn't it? They usually know their stuff and their machines, their most important assets that need to be protected at the highest level, and what is maybe less of a priority. And this information, you need that information to have a working OT security program, because else you're just fighting windmills and trying to secure everything to the highest level, and that doesn't work usually, because then you have a budget problem.
mm, yeah.
So
Who
yeah,
when
for that information you need a higher management.
when you go into that room of like the higher management, are you talking like the C-suite of a company traditionally, Lucas? Like what kind of reality do you see in terms of who are the key stakeholders that you've seen to really make something successful? You know, is it a CFO because you talk about budget, or is it a CISO, you know, because they're obviously the top of the security tree, or is it someone else? You know, I'm curious about that, or is it a combination? I'm sure it probably is a combination of different people, but where have you seen in your experience?
Mm. So, as always, it's a technical answer. It depends. um,
Mm,
uh,
mm,
it actually depends a little bit on how the structure within the company is. Sometimes the CFO is, or often, at least in Germany, I've seen it a lot of times. The CFO is above the CIO, and the CISO is then part of the CFO team, or even beneath the CIO, or sometimes the
mm,
C in CISO isn't worth anything. So that depends. Uh, Ideally, you'll have the COO in there as well, because they are responsible for the whole production usually. Um, in reality, you need to convince them somehow, because, as I said, you need the buy-in and the support from their sides. But usually, and even the information that I talked about, about what is your most critical asset, um, you in reality usually it's someone beneath the C level. Uh, Best case, you have some head of plant or head of production. Sometimes you need to gather this information by yourself, and gather all the segment leaders and so on, and uh, talk with them, and try to get those information, and what is your machine doing, and how does this fit into the whole process. Um, but yes, in an ideal world, you'll get the COO, and of course, for budget and so on, maybe CFO. But in an ideal world, from a technical perspective, you need a COO, and of course CISO to buy in.
mm. Okay.
But in my experience, the CISO is usually the one that you need to worry the least about, because they're usually on your side. Uh,
Yeah.
um, and people like COOs and CIOs have so many other topics than security usually. So you need a little bit more convincing for them to actually, yeah, buy in, and yeah, invest in those topics.
Okay. And is the trick to get that buy-in, like what you've said, sort of almost create a kind of worst case scenario, like what if, you know, and you referenced like a crane falling over before, because I suppose it's almost like a real safety issue, isn't it? And then the implications of that, and then there's commercial issues if production drops down, or can't you can't produce anything, or you know, I suppose there's many different ways it can be spun. the problem.
Mm.
But is it really, is that the biggest trick, I suppose, or I suppose strategy you would use to kind of get that buy-in is really create a sort of what if scenario?
So first, I don't have a playbook to say, okay, that those 10 points and you get every COO to commit to that. That would be great, but I don't think anyone has that. Second, I'm always a little bit against those fear scenarios, especially in marketing and so on, because I think it's a little bit overused and a little bit unfair. But you at some point or basically you need to convince your managers, your C-level managers, that they are ultimately they are responsible if anything happens, and if you can't produce for whatever reason, they are responsible for that, and usually they know it, but usually they try to blend out the security part because it's very expensive. You don't see much of it. You don't have a better and more efficient production because you increase security. The fear is always that it's the opposite, that you lose some efficiency when you invest into security because processes get more complicated and so on. And the trick, if you can call it that, is to convince them and to show them that security is a big part of this responsibility, that that their plant is able to produce whatever they are producing. And we need to get there with every manager that we want to be involved there, that they see this point, okay, we need OT security to ensure that we can produce. Sometimes, and maybe we can get into that point with this transition, sometimes a part of this reluctance to get OT security into their responsibility and into their programs is that they perceive OT security in a wrong way, because people usually know a little bit, especially managers know a little bit about IT security, because that's around for a much longer time nowadays in companies. I've talked to companies, they have IT security teams of 15 people or something like that. Manufacturing companies, and when I talk to them, they're like, okay, yeah, well, we have 2 or 3 guys doing something in OT security, but it's not a full daytime job. But we have 15 guys for our IT security. So that's the level of also acknowledgement and awareness of what IT security does and what OT security does. So they know about IT security, and they know if they would do in what IT security does in their production, and I talked about this before, efficiency will go down. People will try to get around it because it's too complicated to produce anything with those measurements that you do in IT security. It will cost a lot of money to update and patch all your systems, because usually you need, or often you need to buy a whole new machine if you want to patch something, which costs up to millions sometimes. So they don't want to have anything to do with that. And what we need to focus more on is that OT security is not IT security with older devices, because usually in OT security you talk about legacy devices, you talk about HMIs having MS-DOS as an operating system or whatever, and it's not IT security for those older devices, but it's a complete different branch of cybersecurity. Usually in IT security you talk about the CIA triad, like confidentiality, integrity, and availability.
Mhm.
And IT security mostly focuses on confidentiality. So securing your data, nobody needs to see my recipes or my files, my personal files, whatever. That's what IT security focuses on. OT security focuses on availability, and mostly purely that. Everything else is maybe on the third or fourth place, but the single most important thing is availability. You need to produce one number often, or every plant has its own number. Usually, you talk about around 1,000 to 5,000 euros per hour when one machine doesn't work, doesn't produce. That you lose. You directly lose money if your machines don't produce. Depending on when you're in pharmacy, it can get way more.
Yeah.
So you need to produce, and that's your single most important thing. And so availability is much more important than anything else. And then of course safety as well, personal safety, human safety, environmental safety. Those things are usually not even considered in IT security because IT security usually don't have any physical impact on their environment. And that's not just some shifted focuses. So, okay, yeah, like IT security does more confidentiality, OT security does more availability. Those are two different. There are different methodologies to do IT security or to OT security. Also, given the whole environment and the whole systems, given, for example, the fact usually you need to consider that, or it's usually safe to assume that you almost never can patch your OT systems. I know a few OT security guys, or more and more OT security guys, try and focus a little bit more on patching plans and patching OT security system or OT systems. But if you start and you want to ramp up your OT security program, usually you can assume that in the first few years probably it won't be possible to patch any of your systems because your maintenance guys and your even your IT guys doing the OT part, like plant IT or something like that, usually they always learned, okay, it's not possible to patch anything. I've talked to guys trying to update the OS of an HMI and needing to replace the whole machine for a few $100,000 just to update this one OS, which is a small part of it. So that's usually your basis where you start off. You can't patch anything, and that's like 60% of all IT security measurements is patching, keeping everything up to date, and you can't do that in OT security. You also can't do any or way less scans, like security scans, doing some Nessus vulnerability scans or whatever. There are a few PLCs out there who can be pricked by simply ping them over ICMP. So you have a completely different set of measures and a completely different methodology. And also a completely different mindset between IT security and OT security, because this whole topic about how to deal with vulnerabilities and with outdated systems and so on is a completely different mindset. And then it's kind of understandable if higher management people are trained to this IT security mindset, and then they tell you, I don't want to have that in my OT environment, because that will destroy my whole production. And I often hear the words as a consultant and everywhere. it's fine that you guys do your OT security, but we need to produce. We need to have availability. And I'm always trying to explain to them on both sides, IT and OT. OT security is exactly that. OT security is not to keep your data safe. OT security is there to keep your plant producing. That's the single aspect that OT security is there for, and that includes then also things like resources, like memory resources or CPU resources or whatever, to have a look on that as well, because if your memory is full, you can't produce, and then OT security has failed in the end. Yeah.
No, that sounds I like the way you summarize it. OT is for availability and IT is for confidentiality. I think it's a really simple reminder of the difference, and why probably why, like you mentioned before, like IT teams shouldn't be the ones or the only ones responsible for OT as well, because it's a completely different mindset. And that, like you say, almost filters up to the boardroom, the C level as well. Because I suppose it's that classic thing, like, it's within OT, it's everything's working fine until it isn't, and then you're not producing, and then there's panic, and you're losing thousands of euros, maybe millions of euros if it carries on for any length of time, and depending on the industry. And I suppose it's that having to convince people to make that investment where they're not really seeing the direct need for it, versus maybe IT, because a lot of people know IT security, if we don't have firewalls, we don't have X, Y, Z, we are a serious risk. Whereas with OT, it's a completely different mindset, isn't it? So in getting everybody on board, have you ever had to get engineers involved at the sort of shop floor level to help convince the people higher up the chain? Lukas, have you ever seen that? I suppose a tactic, or seen that become effective in these programs and things like that?
Actually, I've done that, or tried it quite a lot, and I've done it quite a lot. And I think it's a very good way to get into this whole OT world, or to get to those people who are responsible for it. Because if you're talking to the guys doing the work, the actual work down on the shop floor, and you can convince them that you're on their side, that you understand their needs, that you understand their struggles with OT security and what is actually important for them. They can help assist you in convincing them, their managers, and so on. You can get their bottom up, more or less. That's actually one valid way to do that, and I've done it quite a lot. And even if you have the buy-in from the management, as an OT security guy, as an OT security manager, or however your role name is, OT security platform manager, whatever, it's always a good idea to be on good terms and good friends with the guys on the shop floor, because, as I said, those are the guys doing the work. Those are the guys who see, when you talk about OT security, those are the first guys seeing a machine doing some weird stuff that they don't expect. And if they know that they can get to you, and they get as soon as possible to you, you have a big time advantage if there's something actually going on, and you have it much more easier in projects if you want to implement some security measures when they're on your side, and you can talk to them and say, look, that's what's stated in the standard. That's our policy. How can we get that onto your shop floor, into your machine? How can we implement that? Because as I said in the beginning, the OT world is always much more individual than the IT world or much else. So you need to tweak a little bit how you implement those policies and those standards into every machine and every segment. And if you're on good terms with the guys doing that, you have a much easier life in the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to be a good middleman, I suppose, in your job, haven't you? Sort of work up the chain.
Yeah. As much as it's a little bit more hands-on than IT security, and it's still technical and everything else, probably depending on the role, but it's a big part of it is it's a people position and a people role. You need, as you said, be a middleman, translate between the different worlds. Get everyone into one room and talk to them and bring them to talk to each other. It's a lot of people work in the end of the day.
And do you think it's getting easier since, if you compare it to maybe when you got into the industry to now, Lukas? Is OT becoming? Are people more aware of this and the need for it and the importance of it? Because, like you say, it's less known than IT security in general, and that's probably for people that are working in these industries, whether it's pharma, manufacturing, energy. You know, they'll know about certain things probably more than OT. Are you finding it easier from what you've seen yourself on a personal level to convince these guys?
Yeah, in a sense, yes. I think it's getting somewhere. I think there's a big bandwidth of how the awareness actually is in different companies. When you have companies within Germany falling under the Kritis laws, you have a much higher awareness because it's requested by law that they have that and do something there. Other companies are more and more getting there, realizing we need someone for OT. It's getting easier. What I actually see is that the industry is so the OT security or security industry is sometimes much more sophisticated than what the companies actually need. Especially if you talk about non-Kritis or non-critical infrastructure companies, they often talk about basics like network segmentation, asset inventory or asset management, things like that, having an OT security program. And the industry wants to sell them things that bring money, and things that bring money are monthly subscriptions like vulnerability management, like monitoring, SOCs, whatever. And those things are great also for OT security, don't get me wrong, but usually it's a few steps ahead of what companies actually need. Companies need buy-in from higher level management, organizational measurements, setting up a functional risk management, setting up a functional OT security program, and then getting into technical details, trying to get the basics right, doing network segmentation, zones and conduits is the term from standard. And so on. I've seen a presentation where a sort of a pyramid was shown, and the first 60 to 80% of OT security measurements were completely without tools from external high-paying tools like SOCs or whatever, and only the last few percents are those big tools that cost a load of money. But you can do a lot without those big tools. Of course.
What do you mean in the 60 to 80%, Lukas? Like what sort of like non-expensive tools? Give us an example, if you could. What do you mean?
As I said, like the basics, you can do your network segmentation.
Okay.
That will cost a lot of money because it will cost a lot of time. You need people, maybe you need some consultants, but you don't need a prescription, monthly subscription tool for that. You can do that without any tool. You can do a proper user management, proper processes for access management and so on. There are tools for that, but depending on your size and what your actual needs are, you can do that without actual tools or without tools like a SIEM or an NDR on an IDS or whatever. And those tools you need when all those basics are done.
Okay.
You can parallelize it a little bit, implement an IDC and IDS, and see what are your weak spots and so on. But when you're doing it from bottom up, one step after another, there's a lot of work until you need those tools, like I said, IDS, SIEM, SOCs, other monitoring solutions, and so on.
And bringing that back to the kind of the key point here is, if you can convince management of those things, like, so you can actually do quite a lot before you have to sign up to, these big investments, subscriptions, etc., like SOCs or whatever. You can get a lot done. So it's kind of do it from the ground up, do it properly, and know what you need, isn't it? Depending on your industry, don't overbuy, don't overcomplicate. Just simplify it as much as possible. All makes very logical sense to me. And it's been great talking to you about this, Lukas. I found that really interesting on a personal level, to be honest. I think the way you've explained some of that is really good, very simple, easy to understand. For a non-technical person, within the OT world, obviously I'm a recruiter, so I'm not an engineer. I found that really useful, insightful. Thanks for sharing your experiences around that. It's been great having you on. So thanks for your time. Brilliant.
Thank you.
And is it okay, I ask all my guests this, Lukas, if anybody listening wants to connect with you, reach out, on LinkedIn or something like that, are you open to doing that?
Absolutely, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, look, thanks again for joining us on the podcast. It's been great having you on, and thanks to our listeners. Please subscribe to hear more guests and more insights in the future. But this is another episode for the Securing Industry podcast. Thanks, Lukas.
Thank you.